Well, we've come to the end of my course. I hope you watched some of them at least and found them useful. I end at the beginning. I'm going back 45 years to my student film, which I made at Stanford University when I was doing my MA degree there. It's called The True Source of Knowledge. What is interesting is to think about what I get from it now, looking at it now after all these years, as to how I was seeing the world and how as a young film student I was thinking I could interpret it. I noticed that it's mostly silent. I was shooting with a wind-up Bolex camera most of the time. The Sync camera that we had at the school was very cumbersome and big, and you didn't get to use it very often. And it was not something I could cart around easily anyway. So silent shots, and obviously I'm enjoying this wonderful campus that was Stanford. And I guess I'm a little sorry now that it's not in color, because it really was such a beautiful place. Anyway, what am I finding? Well, I see the opening sequence. I was very happy with that. I thought it had lots of bounce and verve, and I was slightly mocking the car culture of Stanford. The people with the Thunderbirds and the Jags and the affluence of the place.
Okay, sweetheart, this is Jay Spencer Dunn, your wild one, here on KZSU 90.1 FM. It's 6:30 a.m. in the morning at Stanford campus, up and out of bed, feet on the floor, and mascara in the mozzarella.
They're there because it's kind of an enjoyable thing to get an education, actually.
I came back, in fact, a little bit later to give you some strange statistics about the number of cars on campus.
5,361 students own and operate automobiles, of whose number 3,552 of these automobiles are owned by students who don't live at Stanford, but near enough to drive to school.
The architecture is commonly thought to be Spanish Mission, although it is in fact Richardson Romanesque.
So I'm making up a voice track which tells the story of the university through student voices, through my voice. That may have come about because I was also working at the student radio station and doing sound programs for them, and so I probably got the idea of these voice montages from that.
Now, live from Network Election Headquarters at KZSU Radio on the campus of Stanford University.
I was also very influenced by a wonderful National Film Board film that I saw in class. We were seeing films from the Film Board regularly and loving them, films like Lonely Boy, City of Gold. But this one I particularly loved. It was called in French Jour après jour, day after day. It was about a pulp mill in Quebec, and it made the machines like sort of strange beasts. It animated them. But what I loved about it was the soundtrack. There was a montage of voices, like a poem, like a litany, voices intercut, how people felt working in that strange place. And this little bit here in my film actually comes from that film, I'm sure. That repetition I use here.
Comparative parasitology and protozoa, 4 units, winter, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8 a.m. till 10.
Intensive Chinese, 15 units, summer, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 8 till 12.
Advanced computer programming, the devising of languages for the communication between men and digital computers, 3 units.
Elementary Polish, elementary Russian, advanced Russian, diachrony and synchrony of the Western Slavic.
So I'm wandering around with my little camera. I'm very keen on bikes, which were everywhere because this was the way of getting around on this vast campus once you'd parked your car somewhere. Ironically, I have, of course, no idea that 40 years later I would become a bike advocate and would be talking about riding sit-up bikes and making dozens of films on YouTube about the advantages of riding around in a stately fashion on a sit-up bike.
I cut classes occasionally, but you've got to get your money's worth, you know. Fees are $470 a quarter, $1,400 a year. Works out at about $11 a day.
And I'm starting to make a voice montage. This voice montage, which I'd picked up at the radio station, tell the story of the university through a multiplicity of voices that interlap and overweave on top of each other.
What I'd like to take is one about plant design in architecture. And I think it would be really fun.
Psychological process. A university is essentially a way of bringing together curious and interested students and learned and dedicated professors.
The students here are very bright. The number of 150 IQs wandering around is just fantastic. It puts great demands on you as a teacher. If you don't make sense, if you are not intellectually exciting, they won't come to your classes. They won't read your books.
I also notice that I have a liking for close-ups. I'm looking for faces, expressive faces, candidly caught.
It used to be a wonderful thing to go to the library of a great university. It was the heart of the university. Books were the heart. I have the feeling that students don't have time for the same sense of reverence toward books. They use them, they extract the facts, and then turn elsewhere.
The true source of knowledge these days is in things like our new linear accelerator up on the hill, or the computation center. This is where the excellence is, the new source of knowledge. If you want to know something, you go and ask a machine to tell you the answer. And it does, usually.
The library shop, for instance, I have a sense that books are not on the way out exactly, but something is coming in terms of how we all get information. Computers. I knew nothing about computers. Nobody had computers in those days. And I remember going to the computer lab where there were these computers as big as small cars, and people walking around talking some strange cryptic language, which I had great fun recording, not understanding a word of it.
Okay, anything else? Yeah, I'm glad I thought of it. I had it logged. You'll notice that when you come up on Balgol, and with the compiler has a beautiful bug in it, in case we get clobbered completely, you hit IC3 and give it a trot of 50, and that'll kick the job off, and that's all you have to do.
Okay, see you tomorrow.
Okay.
I loved this final phrase about a trot of 50.
You hit IC3 and give it a trot of 50, and that'll...
Yeah, I think I didn't even show any faces there. I must have known that the machine was an anonymous thing. It was certainly not my world. Interestingly, that immediately after that comes an art class studio. And for the first time and the only time in the film, I reverentially give it a musical backing, as if this is a place that I really love and respect, especially. And then a student comes in, as they do throughout my film, with some private, personal thoughts about what she's doing with her art.
Last year I had a dream. I was painting out in White Memorial Plaza on a huge easel. People were standing around watching me as I was painting. It was a figure of a man in black and white, and the painting became a human force, had the power to destroy itself.
Again, I couldn't look forward to a time when I would actually be an artist myself, as I did become, painting outside like Van Gogh did, and in fact making a feature film about him called Vincent and Me, which won an Emmy. All that was way in the future. For Rubo, the film student here at Stanford, doing his MA. The cafeteria was a place where I picked up conversations about Ayn Rand, who I knew little about, but later found out that she was this right-wing philosopher that seemed to really appeal to people at this affluent campus. I had great fun with the food servers, doing this little sequence here on hamburgers.
Almost anyone knows what makes a good hamburger. The quality of the meat is good, not rancid or fatty. The bun is moist. The product is hot and juicy. And of course there's a substantial portion of it.
I don't know if that man was actually working in the food service or whether I cast somebody who had the right sort of richness.
We sell from 12 to 1,600 hamburgers a day of different types.
I can't remember. It's so long ago.
The most important alienation we've got around here is from the girls, you know. Apparently these girls have been reading a lot of Ayn Rand books, and they're really caught up with this equalitarian, aggressive concept. Turns me off. You just can't relax from it.
We all have our niche, our class, our major, our friends, our peer group, our
social clique we operate in.
The pretty little girl there was not a girlfriend, but she was a student. I think I was very keen on her, which is probably why I gave her quite a few shots in this little sequence here. I don't think she was an Ayn Rand person, but she probably did like Herbert Marcuse. Stanford was a very intellectual place. The teachers were very good, as I explained. But it was also, there were fraternities, and they were the jocks, the tough guys, and I mocked them with probably reading notes from one of their yearbooks.
Unity through diversity is the motto of the Beta Chi fraternity. And by diversity, we run the gamut from football players to the scholar, from civil rights worker to the bigot, from the radical...
And then I had fun with the protocol for a formal dinner, which I put over a gross pie-eating competition that was held at that fraternity.
Now, a procedure at a meal like this is far more formal than the ordinary sit-down meals are served throughout the week. Naturally, the women are served first, and then the fraternity men with their dates.
Pie, big red. Eat 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 pie, big red.
I still love playing contrasts and ironies like that. Stanford was bucolic and quiet compared with Berkeley across the bay. And I went over there when the free speech movement, the famous free speech movement, was breaking up. And somehow I got a recording of Mario Savio making his speech to the thousands assembled and closing down the university.
And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels. Then you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Stanford was not activist in that way. And yet some Stanford people were going to the South on voter registration drives, encouraging Southern Negroes to register for the vote, which was a very dangerous thing for them to do, and also for these whites who encouraged them. There was one guy that I probably met through the fraternity. He was this tough guy, and he told me what it was like to be down there and being beaten up.
When I got out of the car, one of them said, "If you nigger lovers are looking for a fight, we're here to give it to you." And I answered that, well, we're just here to help, which point one of them hit me. And so I assumed the nonviolent position, and then they continued to kick me, and finally 3 of them held me down while one of them urinated on me.
And then I juxtaposed that with a quieter moment, a young woman painting her little shed she lives in behind somebody's house. It's actually my girlfriend, but I don't reveal that. And somehow I've put somebody else's voice on her. Perhaps voicing her actual thoughts, or perhaps me editorializing what I think she should be thinking.
But what do you join and how far do you go? Do you go to Mississippi, or do you just say loudly, "I'm for civil rights," whenever you get the chance? On other campuses like Berkeley, students are very active. Here it's a lot quieter, but there is a new spirit of activism, and it seems to be growing.
Music. I'm not a very musically aware person. My daughter is thrilled that on the credits for the film you'll see the name of Jerry Garcia. This is long before he formed the Grateful Dead. I somehow got him improvising on his guitar, and the end titles has what must be his music.
When you're in the library, reading the works of men like Rousseau and John Stuart Mill, you begin to wonder about the great discrepancy between what is and what ought to be, or what can be. I think that the university can be a true source of knowledge, but that this knowledge is not to remain only in the university. I think that it has to be applied in society. I think that what we learn here has relevance only if we apply it.
film today, it is better than I thought it was. Maybe I remember too much the stress, the tension. I had very little money to make it, very little film to shoot. And when I came to the editing, disaster almost struck. I had to edit the negative myself. I couldn't pay to have that done. And that meant alternating piece of film with images, black, piece of film images, and this was a sort of alternate checkerboard setup so that the lights, when the film was printed, could switch from one setting to another as they went from shot to shot. So I got all that done, and then I realized that tragically, in handling it through the equipment, I'd scratched it to some extent. What to do? I talked to Henry Brightrose, my professor, who was very supportive, and I think it was he who suggested that it was a coating that could be applied to the film that would fill in the cracks and make them invisible. That I did, but I hadn't cleaned the film effectively before I handed it over for the coating, which meant that fingerprints that I had put at the cut points were enshrined on the screen as if this was some sort of police video. It was absolutely wrecked it. And you know what I did? I actually sandpapered every one of those cuts, not on the image side, of course, but on the other side. I sandpapered it back, got the coating off, got rid of the fingerprints. Madness. But it worked. And then I sent it off to the film board, to the famous Tom Daly, whose films we had seen. I was desperate to get an internship there, which I needed for my degree. Months passed, my course finished, I heard nothing. And so I decided to hitch across the country to New York and then up to Canada, if only, for one thing, to get my print back. I only had two. One had gone to Australia and that had disappeared, and this was the only other one. So I got to Canada, to Montreal, asked for Tom Daly at the front desk of the film board. Oh, he was in a screening somewhere and, unavailable. But if I wanted to catch him coming out, I could go up to Theatre 5 and put my head in the door and then wait till whatever it was they were watching was over. So I did that and pulled back these heavy doors, pushed the other ones forward. I go into the small theatre. There are 5 men in the empty theatre in the front row. My heart sinks. They're watching my film. They're watching the true source of knowledge. I'm thinking, this is so bad. Why did I send this? I'm still seeing the thumbprints. I'm still worrying about every cut, every decision. And these people, these unknown people, are looking at this thing. I didn't know what to do. I just crouched down behind this big, heavy desk. You know, these times in life when you suddenly, through some strange occurrence, your whole perception of your abilities and your skills is thrown into question. I was seeing it through their eyes, I thought. But then the lights went up, and one man said to the other, Tom, this is very good. Where did this come from? Who made it? It's exactly the sort of thing we need, this sort of young vision. And Tom, who I didn't know yet, said, well, I don't know. Somebody sent this to me months ago, and I lost the package. I don't know what his name is. I don't know where he comes from. I thought as a courtesy, at least I should look at it. I was really enjoying myself. And can you imagine the astonishment when I said from the back, excuse me, gentlemen, I'm the filmmaker. I worked at the film board for 30 years, and pretty much all the films that you see in this course or have seen in this course, they were all made at and for the film board. So it's really nice to end this student story with my coming to the film board and getting a job there, which was to last from 1965 into the early 1990s, when another life started, feature films, and coming back to Australia to be head of ABC Documentaries. So that's it, folks. I hope that you found the masterclass useful. I hope you'll tell your friends, pass the word around. Thank you very much for being part of this.